I once stood inside the most impressively stocked pantry I have ever witnessed, belonging to a man who, despite his meticulous preparations, found himself unable to adequately feed his family during a mere week-long crisis. That statement sounds entirely contradictory, so allow me to provide the necessary context. A close acquaintance of mine had dedicated an entire walk-in closet to the concept of food storage. It was a prepper's dream, lined with 50-pound bags of white rice, cases upon cases of canned black beans, and rows of those commercially packaged freeze-dried pouches that retail for $15 a piece. On paper, and indeed visually, it looked spectacular. You would walk into that space and immediately conclude that this individual was ready for absolutely anything the world could throw at him. However, during a severe ice storm that locked down our region for 10 days a couple of winters ago, he came to a realization that was both uncomfortable and terrifying. Almost everything he had stored tasted exactly the same. His children, driven by the sensory boredom of the diet, refused to eat the stored food by the fourth day. His wife was miserable, and the atmosphere in the house was tense. There were almost no fats in the entire setup, meaning there was no satiety. There was no variety, and crucially, there was no way to make any of the ingredients feel like a comforting, real meal. He had successfully stockpiled millions of calories, certainly, but he did not have food. Not in the true sense. He lacked the kind of nourishment that keeps human beings sane, functioning, and hopeful. That specific experience resonated deeply with me because I had been guilty of making those exact same mistakes years prior. When I began my journey into preparedness back in 2012, I did what almost everyone does in the beginning. I followed the standard boilerplate checklists found on forums and blogs. I bought the rice, the beans, the generic canned goods, and perhaps the bucket of oats. Those are fine staples, and I still keep them to this day as the caloric foundation of my pantry. However, as time went on, I began to notice significant gaps. These were not merely nutritional gaps, although those were certainly present and concerning. They were gaps in morale, in flavor profile, and in the kind of eating that actually sustains a person through difficult, high-stress stretches of time, not just biologically, but mentally and emotionally as well. Consequently, I began quietly adding items to my rotation, foods that the vast majority of preppers walk right past in the grocery store. These are foods that are inexpensive, remarkably shelf-stable, nutrient-dense, and in many instances are the items still sitting fully stocked on store shelves when the rest of the aisle has been panic-bought into oblivion. They are not exotic, nor are they prohibitively expensive. They are simply overlooked. There are 13 specific items that I believe are essential for bridging the gap between surviving and thriving. Some of these may sound mundane, and one or two might seem unusual to the uninitiated, but every single one has earned its place on my shelves through actual practical use, not just theoretical hoarding. By understanding the utility of these items, you will likely view your local grocery store through an entirely different lens. Let us begin with an item that most people would never think twice about, yet it serves as the linchpin of a palatable diet. I am talking about bouillon cubes and bouillon paste. I keep several hundred bouillon cubes and a few concentrated jars of paste tucked away in my supplies. They occupy almost no physical space, they cost mere pennies per serving, and they accomplish something that no amount of plain rice and beans can achieve on their own. They make bland, repetitive staples taste like a meal you would actually choose to eat. This matters far more than most people realize until they are in the thick of a crisis. When you are eating from a limited pantry for days or weeks on end, the thing that breaks your spirit is not usually acute hunger, it is monotony. The psychological toll of facing the same flat, unseasoned bowl of starch meal after meal wears on you. It wears on your family. Morale plummets, and people eventually stop eating enough calories simply because they cannot face another bowl of plain rice. A single bouillon cube changes that equation entirely. Drop one into your cooking water and suddenly your rice has a savory depth. Your soup has a backbone. That pot of beans tastes like something your grandmother might have simmered on the stove all day. Beyond the crucial element of flavor, bouillon provides sodium and essential minerals. In our modern health-conscious society, we often demonize sodium, but when your diet is restricted and you are under the physical and mental stress of an emergency, electrolytes matter. Storage is incredibly simple. You can pull the cubes out of their flimsy cardboard packaging, transfer them into glass mason jars or any airtight container, and they will remain viable for years. I have used cubes that were years past their printed expiration date, and they were perfectly fine. Because nobody panic buys bouillon during a rush, it is one of those items that is almost always available, even when the rest of the soup aisle is bare. The second item is perhaps my favorite thing in my entire pantry, yet most people in the Western preparedness world barely know it exists. That item is ghee. Ghee is essentially clarified butter, but taken a step further. The milk solids and water have been removed, which means it does not require refrigeration and it possesses a remarkably long shelf life. Unopened, a jar of high-quality ghee can last a year or two at room temperature. Some anecdotal reports suggest it lasts even longer with proper cool, dark storage. In traditional Indian households, ghee has been kept and utilized as a staple for centuries precisely because of this stability. Because the milk solids are removed, even individuals who are lactose intolerant can typically consume it without any digestive issues. But the primary reason ghee belongs in your stockpile is the fat content. Most standard survival foods are shockingly low in fat. White rice has none. Beans have almost none. Those expensive freeze-dried meals often strip most of the fat out to extend shelf life. Your body, however, requires fat. It needs it not just for raw energy, but for absorbing fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. Your brain is largely composed of fat, and it needs dietary fat for cognitive function, for generating body warmth in cold conditions, and for hormone regulation. Without adequate fat in your diet, you are going to feel terrible, even if you're technically hitting your caloric targets. You'll feel foggy, irritable, cold, and lethargic. 1 tablespoon of ghee provides concentrated, high-quality fat that signals satiety to your brain. Stir it into hot rice, spread it on a simple flatbread, or use it to fry reconstituted vegetables, and the difference is remarkable. It tastes rich and buttery. It feels satisfying in the stomach. It turns survival rations into something closer to normal food. That psychological shift, the feeling of having eaten a real meal, matters more than most people give it credit for. You can store it in the glass jar it comes in, placed in a cool, dark cupboard. No special equipment is needed, no Mylar bags, no oxygen absorbers, just a jar on a shelf. A jar of ghee costs roughly $10 to $15 and lasts a long time because you're typically using it a tablespoon at a time. It represents one of the best dollar per impact ratios in my entire inventory. Next, we have chia seeds. I'll be honest, I resisted stocking these for a long time because they felt too trendy, like something you would find at a high-end yoga retreat rather than in a serious prepper's pantry. However, the more I researched them, the more I realized I was being stubborn for no good reason. Chia seeds are a genuine nutritional powerhouse. They are incredibly high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are often difficult to source in shelf-stable foods. They contain all 9 essential amino acids, making them a complete protein source. Furthermore, they are loaded with fiber, which is critical for digestion when you're eating a diet heavy in processed or dry goods. But the characteristic that really sold me on chia seeds is their hydrophilic nature. Chia seeds absorb roughly 10 to 12 times their weight in water and form a gelatinous substance. This means that when you consume them, they slow digestion and help you feel full for dramatically longer periods. In a situation where you are rationing food, that is not a minor detail, that is a game changer. Consider the mathematics of hunger. If you add a tablespoon of chia seeds to your morning bowl of oats or rice, you might stay full for 6 or 7 hours instead of merely 3. That potentially eliminates the need for a snack or a defined lunch meal. Over weeks of restricted eating, that math adds to significant food savings. You can eat them raw, you can stir them into water and drink them as a hydration aid, or you can sprinkle them on rice, oats, or baked goods. No cooking is required, which matters immensely in a situation where fuel or electricity might be scarce. Stored in a cool, dry place in an airtight container, they will keep for 4 to 5 years without any special treatment. The Harvard School of Public Health puts their shelf life at 4 to 5 years, which is better than many dedicated survival foods that cost 10 times as much. I keep about 5 pounds in rotation. They're inexpensive, incredibly versatile, and they quietly solve a bunch of problems at once: protein, healthy fats, hydration support, and satiety.
The fourth item is canned full-fat coconut milk. I must clarify that I am not referring to coconut water nor the thin, diluted beverage found in the dairy section. I am talking about the thick, rich canned coconut milk you find in the international aisle or at Asian grocery stores, usually for about $2 a can. This is another critical fat source, and in my experience, it is one of the most overlooked ones in the preparedness community. A single can contains around 40 to 50 grams of healthy fat. That is a significant amount of energy. Add half a can to a pot of rice, and you have just turned a bland, low-calorie side dish into something creamy, filling, and energy-dense. Stir it into a soup, and the whole meal becomes heartier and more comforting. You can even drink it straight if you need a quick calorie boost during high exertion. Here is where it becomes really practical. Coconut milk turns your basic stockpile staples into actual culinary dishes. Coconut rice is a celebrated staple in dozens of cultures around the world. Add a bouillon cube to that mixture and you are eating very well. Combine it with some curry spice and whatever canned vegetables you have on hand, and you've got something that feels like a meal you would choose to eat at a restaurant, not one you're enduring in a bunker. The shelf life on canned coconut milk is excellent. Most cans are good for 4 to 5 years and they store easily. I keep a few dozen cans and rotate through them in my regular weekly cooking, which means nothing ever sits long enough to expire. That rotation principle is important for everything on this list. Store what you eat and eat what you store. It's the simplest way to keep your supplies fresh without any waste. Like many items on this list, canned coconut milk often stays in stock when other items get cleared out. Most people don't think to grab it during a panic rush on the grocery store, which is exactly why it's worth keeping on your radar. Fifth on the list is dried seaweed. I know this might sound unappealing to some, but please stay with me. I am not suggesting you start eating bowls of slime. Dried seaweed, particularly varieties like nori, wakame, and dulse, is one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can store, and it takes up almost no space. The primary benefit seaweed provides is iodine, which is critical for thyroid function. Your thyroid basically regulates your metabolism, your energy levels, and your mood. In a prolonged situation where you're eating from a limited pantry, iodine deficiency is a real risk that almost nobody plans for, as table salt is often the only source people have, and that can run out or be rationed. A few sheets of nori per week handle that nutritional requirement. Beyond iodine, seaweed brings minerals like magnesium and iron, plus some protein. You can crumble it into rice, drop it into soups to rehydrate, or eat it as a salty snack. It stores for years in its sealed packaging and costs very little. I pick mine up at Asian grocery stores where you get large packs for a few dollars. Preparedness is not just about having enough calories. It's about covering the nutritional bases that keep your body actually functioning well. Seaweed fills a micronutrient gap that rice and beans simply do not address. Item number 6 is nutritional yeast. This is another item that sounds like it belongs in a niche health food store rather than a survival pantry, but nutritional yeast has genuinely impressed me with its utility. It's a deactivated yeast that possesses a savory, nutty, and almost cheesy flavor profile. 2 tablespoons provide around 8 grams of complete protein, plus a meaningful dose of B vitamins, including B12, which is notoriously hard to get from most shelf-stable foods, especially if you're not eating fresh meat. The practical application is simple. Sprinkle it on rice to simulate a cheese flavor, stir it into soups for thickness and taste, or add it to beans. It makes bland food taste significantly better, which, as we've already discussed, is not a luxury, it's a necessity when you're eating the same things repeatedly. It keeps well in an airtight container for a year or two. Because it's not on anyone's standard prepping list, it's almost always available. The 7th item is potato flour. I want to be clear that I am not talking about potato flakes or instant mashed potatoes, but actual potato flour. I stumbled onto this at a European grocery store and started researching its properties. Potato flour has been a staple in Eastern European cooking for generations, and for good reason. It lasts significantly longer than regular all-purpose flour when stored properly, up to 10 years in an airtight container with an oxygen absorber. It's naturally gluten-free, which matters if anyone in your household has a sensitivity and can't eat wheat-based survival foods. It's incredibly versatile. You can make simple flatbreads with just potato flour, water, and salt.
You can use it to thicken soups and stews, adding calories and texture. You can blend it with other flours for baking. The thing I appreciate most about potato flour is the resistant starch content. Resistant starch is a type of starch that feeds beneficial gut bacteria and helps you feel fuller longer. When you are eating from a limited supply, that sustained feeling of fullness is worth a lot. A 5-pound bag costs around $8 and provides a substantial number of meals. Store it in a food-grade bucket with a quality seal and an oxygen absorber, and it will be there when you need it, likely long after regular flour has gone rancid. Number 8 is peanut butter powder. You are likely familiar with regular peanut butter, which is a great prep item, but has a limited shelf life due to the oil content. Peanut butter powder is the dehydrated version, with most of the oil pressed out. It weighs almost nothing, takes up a fraction of the space, and lasts far longer than regular peanut butter because that removed oil is what typically causes rancidity. You can mix it with a little water to create a spread, add it to oatmeal for a protein boost, or stir it into a savory sauce for noodles to make a satay-style dish. It is an easy way to add protein, calories, and a familiar, comforting flavor to almost any meal. The shelf life in sealed containers is typically 2 to 5 years, though I have seen sources suggesting it can last even longer in optimal conditions. It bridges the gap between the high utility of peanut butter and the long-term storage requirements of a deep pantry. The 9th item is a deeper cut, but if you're interested in genuine long-term food security, this might be the most important item on this entire list: hard wheat berries. Wheat berries are the whole, unprocessed wheat kernels before they are ground into flour. When stored in food-grade buckets with oxygen absorbers, they can last 30 years or more. Some sources say they last essentially indefinitely. The beauty of the wheat berry is that you grind it into flour only when you are ready to use it. Freshly ground flour is nutritionally superior to anything you would buy at the store because all the vitamins, minerals, and healthy oils are still intact. Store-bought flour has been sitting and oxidizing for months before you even open the bag. Meanwhile, that bag of all-purpose flour in your pantry starts going rancid after about 6 to 8 months. Whole wheat berries stored properly will outlast your mortgage. You do need a grain mill, but a decent hand crank mill runs about $50 to $60, and it's a one-time purchase that requires no electricity. Beyond flour, you can cook wheat berries whole like rice for a chewy, filling grain bowl. You can sprout them to create fresh greens, even in the dead of winter when no garden is growing. You can make a simple porridge that has been feeding civilizations for thousands of years. I keep a couple of 100 pounds in 5-gallon buckets. The cost per pound is remarkably low, often under 50 cents, and the calorie density is excellent, sitting at about 1,600 calories per pound. This is the kind of preparation that gives you real long-term food security, not the exciting kind that gets clicks on the internet, but the boring, reliable kind that actually works. Item 10 is powdered whole eggs. Most preppers are familiar with powdered milk, but powdered eggs are weirdly underrepresented in the conversation. They're shelf-stable for 5 to 10 years, depending on the packaging quality. They reconstitute easily with water, and they provide high-quality protein and fat in a lightweight package. Think about how central eggs are to normal cooking. We use scrambled eggs for breakfast, eggs as a binder in baking, and eggs added to fried rice or noodles for richness. Losing access to eggs is one of those things that makes a restricted diet feel much more limited and depressing than it needs to be. Powdered eggs solve that problem quietly and completely. They are not cheap per serving compared to fresh factory-farmed eggs, but calculated per year of shelf life and per unit of dense nutrition, they are a solid investment. I keep a few cans and rotate them into regular baking so the supply stays fresh, and I stay familiar with how to use them effectively. Number 11 brings us back to the international aisle, quality instant noodles from Asian grocery stores. I am not talking about the 25-cent packets from the big box store that taste like salty cardboard. I'm talking about the noodle blocks and soup bases you find at Korean, Japanese, Chinese, and Vietnamese markets, the ones that local communities actually eat daily. The noodle quality is genuinely different. Many are wheat-based or egg-based with real nutrition. The seasoning packets are complex, containing real spice blends, dried vegetables, mushroom powder, and actual soup bases. The variety is enormous. You can have a different flavor profile every day for weeks. Here is the thing about extended emergencies that does not get discussed enough. Food monotony is not just unpleasant, it is functionally debilitating. Research on soldiers and disaster survivors consistently shows that when people eat the same thing day after day, their decision-making suffers, their motivation drops, and their emotional resilience erodes. The military learned this decades ago, which is why rations come in so many varieties. Variety is not a luxury, it is infrastructure for keeping your mind sharp when things are hard. The most prepared person is not the one with the most food, it is the one whose family will actually eat what is stored. I keep about 100 packets in a large plastic bin. They stack flat, cost very little, and prepare in minutes with minimal water. During actual shortages, Asian grocery stores tend to stay well stocked because most people simply do not think to look there. Walk in sometime, even if you are not in a rush. Browse the aisles and talk to the staff. You will find things you never knew existed, and many of them have incredible shelf stability because these are foods designed for cultures where preservation is a way of life. The 12th item is textured vegetable protein, or TVP. This one is going to be new for a lot of people, but it has been quietly used by backpackers, budget-conscious families, and serious preppers for years. It is dehydrated soy protein that comes in granules or chunks. You rehydrate it with hot water or broth for about 10 minutes, and it takes on a texture remarkably similar to ground meat. The protein content is impressive, boasting around 50 grams per cup of dry TVP. 1 pound of the dry product rehydrates to the equivalent of roughly 3 pounds of ground meat. Now, it's not going to fool anyone into thinking it's a premium steak, but mixed into chili, pasta sauce, tacos, or stir-fries, it absorbs whatever flavors you cook it with. Paired with good seasoning, your bouillon, your coconut milk, your spice packets for those instant noodles, TVP becomes genuinely satisfying. Protein is one of the hardest things to stockpile affordably. Canned meats are heavy and expensive. Freeze-dried meats are outrageously priced. TVP solves the protein problem at a fraction of the cost and weight. Stored with oxygen absorbers in airtight containers, TVP can last 10 to 15 years. It takes up almost no space and weighs very little. This is one of those items where the math simply makes sense. Finally, number 13 is dark chocolate. I mean real dark chocolate, 70% cacao or higher, not sugary candy bars. High-quality dark chocolate has a shelf life of 2 years or more, and it provides something almost nothing else in a prepper's pantry can, a genuine psychological lift. There's actual science behind this. Dark chocolate contains compounds that promote the release of endorphins and serotonin in the brain. It is one of the most reliably mood-boosting foods that exists. In a stressful, uncertain situation, a single square of good, dark chocolate can shift someone's entire outlook. I've seen it happen. During a multi-day power outage, my wife and I would break off a square after dinner each night. It was a small thing, but it made the whole experience feel manageable. It felt like a choice we were making, not a situation that was strictly happening to us. Our children looked forward to it. It became a small ritual that held the day together. Peace of mind does not come from having the most supplies. It comes from knowing that what you have will actually sustain you, body and mind. Beyond the psychological benefit, dark chocolate provides quick energy from its fat and sugar content, and the antioxidants are genuinely beneficial. I keep several bars vacuum sealed and stored in a cool, dry place. It is one of the cheapest morale investments you can make, and I think that's something we drastically underestimate in this space. The things that keep people okay mentally are just as important as the things that keep people alive physically. You cannot separate the two. So that's the list. 13 foods. If you notice the theme running through all of them, it is this. The gap in most people's preparedness is not calories. It's the stuff that makes those calories worth eating. It's fat, flavor, variety, micronutrients, and morale. These are the elements that keep a family functional and cooperative during a hard stretch, rather than just technically alive. Notice what is not on this list. Nothing here requires special equipment. Nothing costs a fortune. Nothing needs a basement or a concrete bunker. Every single item can be picked up at a regular grocery store, an Asian market, or a health food store. Most of it fits in a closet or under a bed. This is accessible, practical food security for normal people living in normal spaces. You do not need to go out and buy all 13 of these tomorrow. That is not how this works. Honestly, trying to do everything at once is how most people burn out and give up entirely. Start with 2 or 3 that make sense for your household. Next time you're at the grocery store, grab an extra jar of ghee or a pack of bouillon cubes. Next time you pass an Asian market, walk in and explore the noodle aisle. Build slowly. Rotate what you store into your regular cooking so nothing goes to waste and your family is already accustomed to eating it. That slow, steady approach is what separates people who are actually prepared from people who just spent a lot of money once and forgot about it. Preparedness done right does not look like a bunker. It looks like a well-thought-out pantry. Go take one small step this week. That is how this works. One step, then another, then another. Before you know it, you're more prepared than 90% of the people around you, and you did it without a single moment of